Hello, my name is Dr. David Hartz, and I want to thank you for continuing with this next section on science-based functional nutrition with the FCA online CE training. As we mentioned before, the material that I'm giving you, as you could see from the first session, is, I believe, some really cutting-edge nutritional as well as energy-based information that I believe is going to change the course of really how we deal with people naturally, because we need ways to be able to evaluate the human body without doing just a chemical analysis of their blood and looking at the physical disease as it manifests in the body by imaging techniques. I mean, those are all really good. We need to do that. We need to figure out what happens when end-stage disease becomes manifested to such a way that it becomes life-threatening. But the ultimate treatment and the ultimate way to be able to actually take care of people is to find subtle changes in the body that occur before chronic disease manifests in its most severe stage, so that we don't have to do a crisis intervention to try to get people better. And our whole system is set up on that because it's driven by crisis intervention. And therefore, you need more and more very sensitive methods and technology to find problems earlier and earlier. And one of the most sensitive ways to do this is finding changes in the energetic and light-based communication patterns in the body, because that's where disease occurs. We're finding out that, as you saw from the first session, that the cell communication is being actually affected and controlled by subtle light frequencies. We're going to see more of that in this section. And these are actually transmitting information which is actually critical to how molecules interrelate, how the body actually communicates with one cell in replication, because the information for that cell to be replicated and affecting the function of other cells in communication is controlled somewhat, for sure, by subtle light frequencies and biophoton emission. And so when the cells themselves do not have a normal communication or give off, as we saw in the previous session, absorbed light information, scramble that information, and emit information at a different frequency, then all of a sudden now we have different types of communication for maybe possibly abnormal cell growth occurring. And, it's really amazing, as we saw in the last session also, is that the body really gets information from our food as well as chemicals, coenzymes, antioxidants, minerals, and all the other factors of, food itself. That's certainly important, but the information that's in the biophoton emission, which is characteristic of whatever we eat, actually controls how that nutrient is metabolized and used in our body. And so therefore, without that information, we get incomplete utilization of our nutrients in our body. So this is really, really important. And standardized medicine just doesn't have a clue in this. And it's so important that we become the experts in this and utilize it. And what's amazing is your patient base wants to know this. I mean, when they learn it in my practice, they were like, wow, it made so much sense to them. And then all of a sudden, their desire to, eat organic and to be able to get good food and so forth increases because they understand why they need to do it, not just because it's better for you. They start to understand why it's that much better for you. And then you get better compliance and you get better happy patients. And so the overall biophoton emission from nutrients is extremely, extremely important. And that's something that we just need to be able to be sure that we actually educate our patients on. Now, as we talked about, we have 0-point cell communication that occurs. These biophotons are going back and forth from cell to cell to cell to cell. And in many cases, we found, and research has shown, this can happen at several meters apart. We saw with some of the research in the first session. And they can be almost up to several meters apart, and the cells are still communicating with a biophoton emission it's sending out waves of quantum information that is intersecting different areas within the environment of the individual molecules and it's attracting certain molecules and connecting with certain molecules that need to be connected with. And therefore, it doesn't have to be just this random intersection of like taking 4 or 5, tennis balls or even 10 tennis balls and just throwing them in a swimming pool. And then all of a sudden, by chance, these things have to bounce together. I mean, the chances of that are very, very small. But if those tennis balls were communicating some way or another and actually were able to communicate and exchange information, then it becomes much more plausible. And that's what's end up happening with this biophoton and 0 point cell communication. It's actually, we're getting biophoton communication back and forth. So the functions of biophotons are this. So the biophoton enables tens of thousands of different kinds of molecular organisms to recognize their specific targets. Living processes depend on selective interactions between particular molecules. Without this model, it is likely the molecule trying to find a friend in a very big, crowded ballroom in the dark. And that's kind of like you blindfolding yourself or turn out the lights in a ballroom and then having two people there and try to find each other. It's just almost impossible. And yet this is really the established norm as far as the biological theory that accounts for all cell communication. It just doesn't account for it. And it can't account for it because it's not totally how it works. There's certain chemical reactions we're certainly chemical, there's no doubt about that. But we're not just chemical. We're light frequency based, and these subtle energetic light frequencies are having a tremendous effect upon what happens in our body. This is why we see homeopathy, all these other energetic techniques working. This is why laser can change physiology. We've got research now that says you can shine a laser on a thyroid gland and actually change the antibody reactions that are occurring in the thyroid gland. Sure, you can, because it's these cell communications of this light frequencies are affecting the physiology of what's going on there. And we see this in cell differentiation. It's not unusual, or why we should be really surprised by this, because we see in an embryo. You have embryos that are of course developed from the RNA and the genetic spiral helix that really has all the information for development of a child, a human being. It's all in there. But the question is, there's almost 30,000 different proteins. There's a mystery of how does the cell know what protein to pull from the 30,000 we have developed to differentiate cells. I mean, there is knowledge that and there's some direction that has to occur to know what organ and what protein goes where. I mean, it's all there. It's all thrown into a big heap, but what orchestrates it to actually put it to where it's supposed to be? We saw, actually, from Montier's research on the last section that we saw how the DNA spiral helix even was actually reconstructed from the energetic frequencies alone of a previous spiral helix. It wasn't that the spiral helix is still there at all. The protease molecule actually helped pull the nanoparticles, the basic building blocks, but the energetic information from the biophoton physics, biophoton emission that was trapped in that particular vial, orchestrated where every single one of those different proteins were laid down. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. I mean, but it shows you that this is a whole lot more than just nanoparticles and just proteins, and then we got, chemistry doing this. There's an energetic orchestration that's occurring. And that is so critical, because it allows us to be able to enter into a process of being able to manipulate and reestablish more cell communication with these light frequencies and with energetic properties of all kinds of things from all over the world, between herbals and homeopathics and clinical nutrients and even some light therapy, and add it in ourselves, where we can actually reestablish more efficient cell communication and actually kickstart certain metabolic processes in the body and get them back working correctly. And also find out what's disconnected some of this between toxicity and chronic infection. These are things that are occurring in the body that standardized medicine has no idea. And we have to have a way to find this, know where it is, and then be able to test and figure out ways that will actually remediate these problems and get people back on track. And that's what this bioenergetic and biophoton technology, when used in a cohesive system, will actually account for us. And so self-differentiation, even right down to the essence of us being born and developed, it's absolutely critical. I mean, they have old experiments where they've taken salamanders and they cut off an arm or a tail, and then they take a electrical potential field and there's normally a normal field that goes over a body like a salamander with a plus and negative. And what they do is they just reverse these polarities and throw a different electrical field into the midst of the salamander, and it will grow a head where a tail should be, or it totally distorts the normal formation of the salamander because you're messing up the energetic field, the biophoton information that's telling everything where to go. And so that's old research. That's been around 70, 80 years that they did that ago. And this stuff's been around, and we know that this is affecting it, but people just go right on with the chemical model. They just don't research this as they should. So Vaclakovic and Kostic, in their professions of biomedical engineering at the University of Melbourne in Australia, they made these kind of observations. They said they proposed that the molecular interactions are electrical in nature. That's what they're saying. They say we think there's more going on here with intermolecular interactions than just chemical interactions. And they take place over distances that are large compared to the size of the molecules. That's what we just said. That molecule recognizes the particular targets and vice versa by electromagnetic resonance. The molecules send out specific frequencies of electromagnetic waves which not only enable them to see and hear each other, as both photon and photon models exist in the electromagnetic waves, but also influence each other at a distance and become drawn to each other if the vibratory out of phase or in complementary way. So these phase waveforms actually are, as we're going to see, beneficial or detrimental. And we can use those to get information and also get even treatment, but also get information about what is there, what's not. Now, this is the Max Planck that I was just telling you about, research that was done. So a group of scientists at Max Planck Institute for Light in the Department of Physics, it was in Germany. It's a famous research institute there. And of course, a lot of this research ends up coming out of Germany, Switzerland, throughout Europe. And why is that? It's because they are a little more open-minded, and also the research journals and the major journals in those areas will have a tendency to publish this stuff, as we talked about in the first section. They don't have some people that are stopping a lot of this flow. They're open to this. I mean, homeopathy started in Germany. It was developed by a German. And they have parts of their medical society that fight it there too, because they don't want it to be successful. They want to control it with chemistry. They want to have a lock on that market. But it still has such strong support that it really is something that has a lot more research coming out of there. And Max Planck Institute is another one of those. But what they did is they in Germany, they were succeeded in producing single photons from a single organic molecule and measuring its interaction with a second molecule several meters away. And so they have a molecule here, a molecule several meters away, and they were able to release a biophoton from one and see that it affected the other. And they said the emitter, 1,2,3,4 BATAT, or dibenzene xanthine, actually said that transmission was extremely efficient. In other words, not only did it communicate, but it was a very efficient communication, several meters away. Okay? Light frequencies, not chemical. Now, these resonances, we found, move at the speed of light. Okay? And it has to be moving at the speed of light for the body to be able to move as fast as we do and have these hundreds, thousands of chemical reactions occurring per second in the body. It can't happen just through chemistry. There's just no way it can happen. It's impossible to work that way. So each molecule has its own signature frequency. Its receptor or molecule with the matching spectrum of features would tune into this frequency. they get into resonance. So these frequencies get into resonance. It's like two tuning forks on the same frequency. That molecule starts the next resonance, and it produces what Benavente called a cascade of electrical impulses at the speed of light. And so as these things start resonancing, they kind of get in harmony, and all of a sudden that communication starts being very, very efficient. And therefore we have this light communication. And it ends up doing this in what we call a constructive and destructive interference. These waveforms, as we can see, if a waveform here actually functions so that we have peak to peak, that's what we call constructive interference. The amplitude of these two waveforms will actually be accentuated, and you'll actually even get a bigger waveform than even these two just added together. And it's called constructive interference. So if you took one particular substance and you interrelate it with a body or something that has that particular frequency, you're going to get an amplitude constructive interference that actually multiplies that frequency. But if you take and you have two frequencies that are actually inverse to each other, one waveform is going to actually negate the other, and you're going to have destructive interference, which is actually going to negate it. And so you see this happening with light, you see it happening with other types of electrical waveforms, and this can be used when we actually get to the place where we have frequencies we're interrelating with the human body. We can use constructive and destructive interferences to get information. If you have a frequency of a clinical nutrient and you have a frequency of a bacteria, and that waveform of a bacteria is functioning, and all of a sudden you have a clinical nutrient frequency that negates it, that's absolutely negates it, or amplifies it, then we know that the effect upon that, or the relationship between those two things, we can tell what they are. It's going to be helpful, it's going to be harmful. I mean, if all of a sudden you have something that negates or is against the waveform of your body as far as the healthy function of your body, and you interrelate that waveform in, and all of a sudden it reflects through the autonomic nervous system, which we talked about in session 1, you often can have a down regulation of the entire nervous system, which you could pick up on a muscle lock, a neurological muscle lock, and all of a sudden now you have an indicator of what's going on. You're not just shotgunning, you're actually lasering a specific frequency to a specific remediation of a specific cause, and all of a sudden you have specific information on what's going on and what can help. And this is just, mind-boggling that you could do this, but it can. And we've done this through kinesiological for years. They've had the clinical, but we haven't known why it does it. But this is why we're getting these kind of reactions, is because, we have these waveforms, which we have everse and inverse relationships, which causing constructive and destructive interferences. And so by using this, we can get tremendous amounts of information, and it just takes the guesswork out of this. And this is why we use it, and this is why we don't just use blood, is because we're getting specific information by doing this. And we can see some of these biophoton emissions in organic and conventional substances and produce and so forth like this. We can see, like a sprout, how much this energetic emission is coming off. This is not an ore, this is a proton emission from it. You can see down here, even with organic broccoli, the difference between conventional and organic. See how much more energetic emission is coming off of this, and this is information on how this particular vegetable is going to be utilized in the body. It's got information for how, where, and how to go and how to function. And you can see you get a bunch of chemicals here, but you don't get much information. All right, you can see how much information is on it. And we go over here to the mushroom. You can see an organic compared to a conventional. How much more vibrancy. When you add this kind of biophoton information into the body, you literally increase the whole biophoton resonance of the body. And by doing that, your immune system works better. Your whole function of your body functions better. It's like turning the light switch up. I mean, you become more resonant and more healthy in general. I mean, it's kind of a generalized statement, but if the increased bioresonance of your body increases, the communication from the entire cellular network of your body increases, and therefore the function increases. And we see a direct relationship between the amount of biophoton emission and so forth that's in the body and how healthy people are. Once again, organic tomatoes down here, we can see a difference in resonance. And And of course, you can see these baby carrots, same way. So we could do this over and over again, and they've done research on this ad nauseum with biophoton multipliers to see actually the biophoton emission coming off, and it's definitely related between those two. And we can see this is in a human being here that the ultra weak photon emission is definitely can be seen. It can't be seen with the naked eye, but when we get scanners here, you can start picking it up on people. You can see the emission coming off different parts of the body. And we're getting to a place now where people are actually able to measure some of this and quantify it. And eventually, we're going to have something like Star Trek where you can go up and down and measure this stuff like Dr. McCoy does, on Star Trek, if you know about that. And we're going to get there. I really want one of those things. That would be great to have. But we don't, so we have to use some energetic testing with some muscle Loxray at this point, which I do believe is still the best way to get this information. But eventually, I believe we'll be able to scan the body, get information with an emission from the body, get information from that, and then be able to actually even treat with specific energetic frequencies to actually be able to remediate abnormal cell communication because of abnormal biophoton communication. Now, we got a couple different researchers here. And one of this is, it's got a weak light biophoton emissions are contributed by intercell communication involved in reproduction, maintenance, and cell health. We can see that there's a lot of different research that's out there, and we're going to show just a little bit of it as we go along. But the general properties of a biophoton are as follows, okay? Restore energy levels, improve intake of oxygen and nutrients in the cells, initiate body detoxification, improve capillary circulation, strengthens the immune system, reduces inflammation and pain. We know this is what is affected by biophoton emission. Regulates normal imbalance, improves nutrient absorption, protects from ultraviolet and harmful wireless radiation. We know this, and I think there's multitudes of other things, but we actually have research that shows that this is directly related. So we know that this emission is very, very important for overall health. Ashman, in his book, Energy Medicine, if you ever want to read something to put you to sleep at night, this is a good one to do it. But it's got a really good information in there, but it's pretty heavy duty, deep. But he makes a couple different statements, and he's got some really good research in here, and he backs it all up with very good research. And he makes the case that this is going to be the medicine of the future. And he states this: in the living body, each electron, atom, and chemical bond, molecule, tissue, or cell or organ has as a whole has its own vibratory character. And so we have every organ, every tissue, every specific molecule has its own vibratory frequency and character. And by being able to test them, we can test what normal is and compare it to abnormal and get information about what's going on in the body. Since living structures and functions are orderly, biological oscillations are organized in meaningful ways, they contribute information to the dynamic vibratory network that extends throughout the entire body. So each part of the body has a vibratory frequency or network, and that network contributes to every single one else. Energy medicine and vibratory medicine seeks to understand this continuous energetic matrix and to interact with it to facilitate healing. And so it's becoming recognized more and more. Now, we know this because we've seen this in magnetic resonance imaging. We see that when you put somebody in a big magnet and then you flip-flop the polarities of the magnet, what you're doing is they found out, I think the Medians, the guy that originally discovered this, they found out that there was a certain frequency that was unique to every single tissue, that it had to do with the spin, the rotation spin, the bioenergetic spin of these particular energetic emissions. And when you put you in a big magnet, which is what these MRIs are, and then they flip-flop the polarity of your body. They go positive, negative, and they flip it. That's what a lot of the clicking is when you're in the MRI. And when they do that, they found that it causes these spins to release a specific frequency. And the MRI just captures those frequencies and just puts in, it makes an MRI, makes a film, a image of basically whatever it's trying to image from those frequencies. And therefore we end up being able to see something much, much deeper in the body. And so The proteins absorb from the energy from the magnetic field are flipped in their spins, and when the field is turned off, the photons gradually return to their normal spin and produces its process, and then the return process produces a radio signal that can be measured in receivers and scanners, and it's made into an image. And that's exactly how they do this. And so this fact that we have these frequencies that are being emitted from certain tissues that are unique is not unusual. I mean, we've been doing it with MRI forever, but most people don't realize that. They just think, they don't know how they think they're getting it, but that's how they're getting it. It's obviously radiation going to the body. It's measuring an emission from the body, which is what we're doing, okay? Now, so how can information travel at speeds needed to account for almost 100,000 reactions per second? So we know that it's biophoton, but how does it get through the entire body? How do we communicate this whole thing throughout the entire body? And what we're finding out is that the fiber optic cable transmission travel is at the speed of light. We know this from our communication of our communications. We have telecommunications, which occurred. We started out with wire, just metal, and then of course we came along with optic cable because the data transference with optical cable is just hundreds of thousands of times faster than we could ever do with a metal cable. And therefore, because it communicates the information at the speed of light, because it's a light that's going through the optic cable. And so it does it at the speed of light. And so it would be interesting with it if we had a kind of a cable system within our body to transfer these energetic light frequencies. Well, guess what? We do. All right. And the interstitium and matrix of the body is actually made up of all kinds of connective tissue that has microtubules within the matrix. In other words, our cells are not made up of just like protoplasm. They have a matrix within them. And in every cell is made up in a matrix and an interstitium that holds all the cells together. And that interstitium, of course, can become toxic and everything else within that. That's what we call the environmental terrain of the body. But it's also made up of tremendous amounts of connective tissue, microtubules, which we know now can transfer these biophoton frequencies. And so you end up, when you shine a laser onto the body, you're connecting and shooting and hitting the body and basically shining the frequencies of the laser, or when you take in a biophoton emission into the body by ingesting it, you're introducing it into the body into a matrix of tubules of little fiber optic cables that can take this information at the speed of light throughout your entire body. We see the cell matrix and tubules as something that is very, very intricate and very, very, large throughout the entire system of the body. And it's a filament network that, goes throughout the entire, in a very complicated, very dense network that is basically able to transfer these light frequencies. We see it if you see them on end, they look like little tubules when you cut them. And they've done research now where you took almost like a slab of cartilage off of a bovine, off of like cow connective tissue, a gristle. And they've done this where they've taken a slab of it and they shine a light into the end of, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt actually did this research. And he shined a light into the end of the connective tissue, and you could see the laser at the other end. You could see the light at the end of the other end of the connective tissue where it was cut. So it's actually transferring, it has ability to transfer light frequencies from one end to the other. Now, here was a research that basically talked about biophotons and neurocommunications and signal demonstrated by in situ biophoton autography. And it basically came up with this conclusion. The mechanism of biophoton conduction along neural fibers may be mediated by protein-protein photonic interactions. In other words, not only is it just communication in the body, but they're believing now that neural fibers, actually, the nerves that runs down in the peripheral nervous system, not only has an electrical connection that we know has an action potential that runs down these particular nerves, but along with those nerves, there's actually microtubules that run the length of the nerves that could be actually and is conducting some biophoton information. In fact, we believe now that a lot of the meridian systems that we have in ancient acupuncture and so forth are just these biophoton connection of these light frequencies. And these meridians actually are more of a light frequency connection. And as these meridians flow through the body, the acupuncture is actually reestablishing normal biophoton emission and communication. We see it in the microtubules and the CNS. Here's another research project that comes out of Elsevier. It says biophoton microtubules in the CNS in our brain and a holographic computer. Elsevier Journal says several experiments show that there is a cell-to-cell communication by light in different cell types. This article describes theoretical mechanisms of subcellular structures that could be involved in this phenomenon. And it goes through several different modes of interconnection of these microtubules within this research. And also even in the embryonic flagellum, they believe that this is related, okay? And so they're connecting it all the way along. And we see in this particular one in the Journal of Photochemical and Photobiology in 2014, we see biophoton signal transmission and processing in the brain. Once again, this paper review relevant experimental findings that discuss possible mechanisms of biophoton signaling transmission in the nervous system. Once again, the substance of this model of neural communication, it takes into account the bioelectrical as well as the biochemical process of communication. So they go through, and if you'd like to get some of these articles and read them, they're very interesting. Basically, they're telling you, yes, we think there is a biophoton relevancy to how these are communicating and how our nervous system communicating, because it's a lot more than just, they're actually believing now that the biophoton field of the body actually holds some of this information in the biophoton field and the brain merely accesses it, which is just hard to believe, but that's where they're going now. That it's like your brain's just like the computer, and it's got an outside hard drive, and it's just accessing information. It's quite amazing, and it's kind of like quantum physics. It's just really, really amazing stuff. Here's another one, cell communication through light. Its conclusions was, if we can devote significant effort to this area of research, we may one day develop a non-invasive application technology with a fundamental impact into the nature and healthcare and medicine. Amen. That's what we believe. They're coming up with the concept that this is so important to the overall function of the body, that if we can actually develop ways to have an application of non-invasive applications to affect this fundamental communication and pathways, that we can affect overall healthcare of the body. And that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, I think they're going to get to a place one of these days where we're going to be able to actually treat the body with frequencies of things, maybe even drugs or pharmacology, but be able to treat through light frequencies. But I think the best way to do it right now, obviously, is to do it by, what's been put into the earth, which has these frequencies in it to be able to take into the body, because we certainly do have nutritional deficiencies and everything else we can handle at the same time. So, as these energy fields produced in the RNA and DNA, as we've seen, the spiral helix, these biophoton emissions come out of every single molecule. They come out into every single cell, and they come out of every single organ, and then they come out of the body, and they exit in specific patterns out of the body, and they come out in what we call coherent or incoherent fields, and then it produces a biofield that actually exists around the body. This is a little different than auras. This is what gets confusing to people, and they go, oh my gosh, this is aura, and this is like, mystical, tie-dye, let's go off and, do some marijuana or something, out of my back in my age. But no, this is not what this is. This biofield actually produce a specific energetic field that we can interact in individual frequencies to. And there's characteristics of this field. Basically, the bottom line is there's a healthy field that exists around the body if everything is working correctly. When it doesn't work correctly, it will torque or have specific angles of deflection. And also there's a holographic image which is produced from this that gets dysfunction in it. But that gets a little too complicated to explain. But the bottom essence of this is there's normal biophoton fields and there's abnormal biophoton fields. And by actually analyzing your field, you could have a field that's supposed to be symmetrical, and all of a sudden you have a big hole in the field. And the question is, why is that hole there? Or instead of having the field coming out at a certain angle, the whole field shifts. And if it does, there's a reason. And those particular reasons go all the way down to the cellular level. I mean, all the way to the cellular level. So this is a very good way to be able to get really deep information. It's different, yeah. But we're going to be doing this in the future. I mean, this is going to happen because it's coming. And either we use it or medicine takes it. Okay, and I'm hoping we're going to use it. So, NIH, National Institutes of Health, the CAM, they've changed this name now, but back when even it was CAM, they found out that this was going to be a very important, and through the research, this idea of biofield was important, and they wanted to separate it away from energetic therapies and long distance prayer and tie-dye and everything else that goes along with all this. And they realized it was very important, so they wanted to try to separate it out. And so they came up with the name biofield. They coined that field. They say so, because they wanted to be sure that it was separated from a lot of the other things that can spin off of this. And so they termed biofield. So we use biofield because it's something that we can use in a researched, established way that we know we have information on this, and we can use the biofield itself to actually affect the body. And there's nothing wrong with all the other aspects if folks want to get into those, but that's not what we're talking about with this. We're keeping it very specific to the biophoton emission of the body, that we know characteristics of it that we can analyze and get information from to get people better at deep levels. Now, we should be knowing this worked a long time ago because we're luminous beings, are we not? Not this crude matter. Yoda told this a long time ago. But anyway, so some of the characteristics of this biofield is just a few of them. And this is basically what I was saying, is that when we know that when the emission from the body is incoherent, which means it has an incoherent pattern of the light which comes out. Instead of being a laser has a very coherent light, but you end up getting scatter. It's kind of like getting a scatter off a light off of a lake. When you're looking at a lake, you get all this glare and scatter, and then the polarized glasses will actually filter out the scatter, and then you can actually see and filter out only the coherent light that's coming at you. And so there's certain ways to measure this that we have. We can tell whether it's coherent or incoherent light. I just saw research in 2019. I just saw this about a month ago, where they're actually taking emissions now at certain frequencies and be able to tell whether or not something is actually cancerous or not cancerous by the emission off the body, and about 4 different by different frequencies and nanometers of light frequencies. And so we're starting to get differences and be able to quantify the emission differences, which is really exciting stuff. But we can see all these different things that can be affected when you get incoherent light emissions. I mean, you get stuck in the sympathetic fight and flight. You get increased inflammation. I mean, it gets disrupting of that 100,000 biochemical reactions that occur per second. I mean, we see all chaotic photon emission regulation, get distorted cell communication, disruptive sleep, increased cellular activity, the whole body, telomere decay. I mean, this is just indicative of dysfunction and disease. When we get a coherent light emission, now all of a sudden we have everything working much better. We got proper cell communication, we got proper regulatory biochemistry, decreased cellular aging, telomere restoration. And these are just a few things that we've been measuring that we know of. And ramifications are even much, much greater than this. So the idea is that we can get idea of what's going on in the body by the coherent and incoherency of these different factors. And then field coherence measurements. We actually have ways to measure these now through polymers and the angles which they emit and affect upon the nervous system. And we actually have ways to augment the fields where certain crystalline polymers can actually accentuate the biophoton frequencies and make it much easier to test and to feel. And so technology is being developed now that really does help us. Real quick, there's 4 characteristics of water, and this is important because people end up tests with energetic vials and stuff like that. And years ago I saw these vials and I tested with them, I said, yeah, there's something going on here, but what the heck is this? How do they get this stuff? Where'd it come from? And that's one thing that spurred me on. I mean, my German mind just can't. I mean, I like to believe things by faith, but if it doesn't have some good science behind it, I'm not going to. I'm just not going to use it on my patients unless I know how it works. And so there's several different researchers that have done this now with good research on the characteristics of water. And water is a very unique substance. It's extremely unique. And this particular book is very good. And if you want to get this and read this, it puts you to sleep, but it's got some really cool things in there. One of the things it talks about, though, is the 4 characteristics of water. Science can explain the workings of gases through the classic laws of physics. When it comes to liquid and solids, when atoms are packed together, they behave as a group. Water is among the most mysterious because it is formed from 2 gases, yet it is liquid at normal temperature. Nothing is like that. And in the Millian Institute for Nuclear Physics, they coined the term water memory because water seems to have this unique ability to line the molecular structure, not necessarily change the molecular structure, but line the molecular structure up in such a way that it can trap the biophoton frequencies and information into the water, which is exactly what Montier did when he put the frequency in we saw in session 1, and it actually trapped the biophoton frequency. It was able to reestablish the whole spiral helix of the DNA. It has ability to do that, which is very unique. And I don't think there's any coincidence that our body is about 75% water. Okay, I think it's that way because this particular characteristic is important as far as transmitting these energetic frequencies throughout our entire body. We saw Dr. Masaru Emoto did these studies, which were kind of interesting. He took water and then he actually hit the water with certain vibratory frequencies, thoughts, mostly speaking, and then he froze it really quick, froze the water really quick right after he hit it. And when he did it with compassion, it came up with different crystals. Thank you looked like this. Wisdom looked like this. Look down here. Heavy metal music did that. And if he said, I will kill you, look what came up. You fool, water before Buddha's prayer. Okay? But this is what happened with positive influence. It's like the water captured the energetic frequency, whatever was hit to it, and it changed totally the crystalline structure of it. So there's definitely a unique structure within water to do this. Montier did conditional studies on this Nobel Prize winner. He found out that he could actually use a highly sensitive detection system to actually be able to detect specific frequencies of bacteria. And he did this in his research on AIDS because he was trying to help people recover from AIDS, and he found out that, of course, the AIDS virus was there, but then there were co-infections, which we know is true now, that he found that had subtle frequencies. And he could, by analyzing the emissions from the body, he could find out which one had those bacteria and then do certain clinical interventions, which he helped people get better with. And so he actually was able to map specific unique frequencies of bacteria. Here's some of the frequencies that were very, very unique that he found, but he was able to find that they were subtle differences in the frequencies from every single different bacteria. And the same thing with every substance, every virus, every fungus, every parasite, anything in the body. Everything has a unique energetic frequency. The good thing about that is we can use that to get all kinds of information. Every nutrient has a specific frequency, and we can actually see the frequency admission here to an organic and conventional nutrient. I mean, they're just gigantically different as far as the total amount, but the frequency also is different. And they all have a unique energetic frequency. So now we're interrelating frequencies, and then we're using the nervous system to see exactly how they react. These are where imprinted energetic vials come from. This is a vial case off our outer system, but a lot of systems have these, but I always wondered how they worked. It's because of the unique memory that we have in each individual vial that has unique energetic signature and memory. And when we put it in there, it traps that. Now, if you get this under a tremendous magnet, or you can, just make them completely negative, but you have to kind of watch that a little bit. But they're pretty hardy. But you don't want to do some things like, put them through a real strong magnet or something like that. It could actually negate all the frequencies inside. But besides that, they usually last for years and years. But you can use these things, and it's amazing how much information you can get. Ultra weak photon emission is a diagnostic tool. Here's a research paper right here that says these results suggest that the UPE is a ultra small emission of energetic frequency is a suitable tool for detecting subtypes of early type 2 diabetes. They're correlating it with type 2 diabetes. They're starting to use it for diagnostics. And this is very interesting. It's a change in biophoton emission from a breast with cancer. You can see this is in a rat. In a rabbit, and they've induced breast cancer into this rabbit. Here's the breast. And when they do a biophoton emission, look at this, totally different. And so now they're trying to develop scanners that will actually measure the biophoton emission from different parts of the body and be able to quantify it, like I said, with different frequencies to find out whether or not there's a problem there or not. And in clinical practice, I will tell you, I've been able to measure this on people, and I've found areas in breasts, I've had them checked out, and I've saved people's lives by doing this. And I'll tell you, I've just done it. And it's amazing. Now, do we do this in lieu of other good diagnostics? No, we don't say this is in place of anything. But I tell you what, when we can use this in conjunction with other standardized medical diagnostic tools, it finds things that we can't find any other way. It's very, very exciting. Let's cover one case study real quick. This was a man who's 78-year-old tile layer. I just want to give you one and specific case study. And this guy was a tile layer, and we made to be able to do other case studies and some of the other that we're going to do later on in other training. But he presented with weakness and fatigue. He was just totally tired, and his legs and memory problems. He had take late naps every single day just to go. Of course, he's 78 years old. You think this guy was amazing for 78 years old. He had really healthy guy, but he was just really, really tired. So anyway, we did some testing on him, and the energetic testing showed that he had some thyroid dysfunction. There was an abnormal emission from his thyroid that showed a problem, and also his pituitary. And when we did do some blood testing on him, he had a TSH of 6.52, which is very high. So he was clinically hypothyroid when we actually did evaluate him. And of course, medically, they wanted to place him on some thyroid replacement therapy, and we of course didn't discourage that, but he was just really against it. He didn't want to take it for some reason. So we did an intervention on him and found out that in this case, he had a chronic fungal infection that he had picked up in his body, and we actually found that by going through energetically testing and finding abnormal emissions from the heart and thyroid and liver, and then we found also that he had an abnormal emission that was coming from his body. We matched up to fungal, and then we found some remediation that had to be olive leaf, St. wort, garlic, and thistle. These frequencies actually offset the abnormal clinical frequencies of the chronic fungal infection, as well as some other things that he needed to be detoxed from. And we put him on the protocol, and we started just treating him and evaluating with the frequencies to see how he progressed. And as he got better and better, the energetic findings improved. And as they improved, we went ahead and did repeat lab tests on him, and his TSH actually dropped right down to 2.9 as we got the underlying cause of his problem. Now, we could give him, replacement thyroid, and they could put him on Synthroid, or most likely, and it would have dropped his TSH, but his fungal infection would have stayed. And he would never gotten that better. The antibodies from the fungal infection was cross-reacting, and with an autoimmune reaction was going after his thyroid. And by eliminating the underlying cause, we got to the cause of the problem. It's just one example of thousands of them that we've had in clinical practice. But we had to have something, just by the lab test alone, it didn't tell us what was going on. We needed the energetic finding. Okay, if that makes sense. And that's real, real important. Here's his blood studies, too, that we just showed you. Now, this gentleman is very interesting because his name is Dr. David Bohm, and he's one of the foremost theoretical physicists of the 21st century. He actually proposed the theory of quantum mechanics, which actually Albert Einstein said wasn't any good. He argued with it and said it was a bunch of smoky, weird stuff. And David Bohm said, no, it's true. And they got in this intellectual kind of battle for years. And guess who was right? David Bohm was right. So he actually kind of won over on Albert Einstein. And so this guy is a brilliant man who's gone down in history as one of the most famous theoretical physicists that ever lived. And he made this statement: the chief aim of all healing methods should be directed towards the preservation, restoration, and regeneration of the electrical potential. It is within the electrical potential of an organism that is the key to curing and healing are found. Wow. You see, this is going to be eventually I believe, the medicine of the future. It's just a matter of time. I mean, it's got the science behind it. And we're moving that way. Now, what have we learned? Okay. We've had a tremendous opportunity. We have a tremendous opportunity to help more people by widening our scope of practice by utilizing functional nutrition and biophoton physics. Energetic testing is based on hundreds of years of research by some of the foremost scientists and researchers in the world. Biophotons are emitted from the DNA and exit the body in specific coherent patterns, producing a biofield. This field can be measured and correlated to normal function and health. Identification and remediation of specific causes of chronic disease can be uniquely identified, and specific nutrition can be determined by their unique frequencies. Water has memory, and it's very unique, that can hold and maintain these frequencies. Because of the uniqueness and effectiveness of neurokinesiological testing and biophoton energetics, we in chiropractic need to be the leaders of this technology in research and practice. We don't need to shy back from this. We don't need to be trying to say we don't know how this works. We need to be standing strong on the fact that there's good research behind this. And if people think that this is woo-woo or mystical or something, it's because they're ignorant, and the patients need to be educated. And then we covered a case history for you also. So I want to thank you for joining me for these two sessions, and I hope they were beneficial to you. I think it's very exciting stuff myself, and there are systems out there for you to continue your education with, and we encourage you to do that, because you know what? There are millions and millions of people who need your help. They need to be evaluated with more specific, sensitive energetic tools, and being able to have protocols developed for them that's specifically designed for them, that need your help and are going to be taking pharmaceuticals to cover over their symptoms unless we have practitioners that can help them. And so I hope that you do continue on, because there's lots of people out there that need you. Thank you for joining me on these sessions, and God bless.